I think this story is really cool. It's something that the football world kind of ignores a lot. And it's something that, just because people are ignoring it doesn't mean that it's not going on. Like, I'm also guilty of this. I'm very elitist when it comes to my football. I'm talking about Champions League. I'm talking about La Liga. I'm talking about the Premier League. Maybe I'll dabble in some Bundesliga. Like, I barely even talk about MLS, I feel like, on this channel most of the time. And a lot of the other stuff that covers football is generally going the same way. And that's fine. We like watching the best players in the world. But there are professional sports, and particularly large-scale professional football there is professional sports and large-scale professional football going on in a lot of different countries. But the vast majority of the countries on the planet are going to have professional football teams running around in them, leagues with big stadiums and lots of fans. The problem for those countries is that not every country is stable enough to be able to produce regular, normal league seasons, right? Because something that, I grew up in and I'm accustomed to, obviously, in the United States, and a lot of people, whether you're in Brazil or the UAE or England, you're used to the fact that there's just a season every year, sans COVID, right? Like, every single year there's going to be that cycle. There's going to be games to be played. And then, so there's certain questions that never have to be answered, which, would be like, hey, what happens if it's not safe for us to play the games, right? I mean, sure, like, in the time that I've been growing up, security at sporting events has gone up a ton, right? But that's more kind of a preventative thing. I'm talking about generally in a country, what happens when it's not safe for teams to play games, just logistically. I mean, you can think about the challenge here. Think about what happened to so many clubs when COVID hit and you couldn't put fans in the stands. Screw putting fans in the stands. I'm talking about being able to play games at all. What happens to a club, for example, that is competing in the Champions League of its continent, that all of a sudden has such significant domestic issues that it's not safe for that club to continue to operate in the country that it is from? What do you do? I mean, you've got staff, you have players, you have fans, right? You have this entire apparatus that kind of depends on matches happening and money being brought in from those matches happening and all this stuff, right? All of this stuff that's just churning and churning and churning and churning and churning. You're not necessarily going to stop that. And I'd never thought about this as being a possibility before, which is crazy because I've actually talked about this exact situation on this channel in regards to the national team of this country, which is Sudan. If you remember that video, Sudan actually is going to knock Ghana out of AFCON in qualifying. In 2 matches between Ghana and Sudan, Sudan got 4 points. It beat Ghana at home, which their home stadium is in Tunisia because Sudan's in the middle of a civil war. And it's a new one, different one than the one before. They've started the party again, I guess. I'm not even going to attempt to explain it. I don't understand the internal politics of Sudan. I know South Sudan split off from Sudan, and now there's another civil war going on. That's what I know. And that civil war is so bad that they are not allowed to play home national team matches because they're not able to guarantee the safety of, large stadiums full of people. And if you're laughing, if internally in the back of your mind, you're like, oh, I'm just saying that. No, the club I'm talking about today, this is their stadium in Khartoum, Sudan. That stadium seats 60,000. And if you took that and you placed it right in Liverpool and told Newcastle that was their own stadium outside of the weird track around the field, I think they'd be perfectly happy with that, right? I first noticed this when I started following African qualifying for the World Cup. And I watched a penalty shootout between Tanzania and Burundi in a 55,000 seat stadium in Tanzania. And you realize that as much as you try to be open-minded and see the rest of the world, through an unbiased glass, that it just hit me that I assumed countries like Sudan and Tanzania, not that those countries are similar at all, but just using different examples, right? It never occurred to me that they would have big sporting events in the way that I grew up watching big sporting events, that they would have big sports stadiums that 60,000 people can fit in. This is the stadium for Al Hilal, not the one from Egypt, but the one from Sudan. A very historically significant club in Africa. that has been in the group stage of the African Champions League basically every year of the last 15 to 20 years and has played against all of the best teams in Africa and clearly held its own. Because Al Hilal from Khartoum and Al Mariq, the other best club from Sudan, produce over 50% of Sudan's national team players alone from those two clubs. Remember, the same national team that just got a result against Ghana, a 2-0 win against Ghana, a Ghanaian team that is featuring all of the guys you would think of for Ghana, from Iñaki Williams to Mohamed Kudus on down, right? They're playing for clubs like that in stadiums that look like this in a very legitimate, like, professional sports league. But now there is this civil war going on, and so they're not playing here. But fortunately for Al Hilal, there is a solution. The club is now playing in the Mauritanian League. And the first person to tip me off on this was the Sweeper Pod. They pointed out that the Mauritanian League, which, by the way, people fail to understand it's like my life's work to try and educate people how large Africa is, because the Mercator projection absolutely destroys like any perspective. Allow me to show you how far away Mauritania is from Sudan. This is a website called The True Size Of. Okay, this website reanimates the Mercator projection. It allows you to take one thing and shove it over something else. And if you don't know what the Mercator projection is, we're just going to go down rabbit hole inside rabbit hole here. The Mercator projection is how you take a globe and you place it flat. If you ever tried to take a piece of paper that is bent round and push it flat, it doesn't work. And there needs to be some distortion in order for the globe, which, is round. And if you don't believe that, dude, get off the internet, right? Like, go read a book. I don't know what to tell you. But the projection, the Mercator projection, compensates for that. And the way it does it is it reverberates the distortion out from the equator. So at the equator, which is right here, right, everything is bang on accurate. The further you get away from the equator in steps, the more distorted it gets. That is why Russia, in Canada, in Greenland look like they've been stretched out like silly putty, right? Russia's northernmost part is not that big. Antarctica is not some giant monster at the bottom of the planet larger than the rest of the entire planet combined, right? It just happens to be right on the fringe and is so massively distorted. Allow me to show you the true size of Greenland compared to Africa. Even though when you hold it up here, it looks huge, that's the size of Greenland in Africa. Not to say that Greenland's not a really significant island, right? It stretches from the southern to the northern border of the United States, which is not small. It is larger north to south than the tip of Scotland to Morocco. Okay. That's what it looks like in Africa. This, as you probably had noticed by now, is the United States. Sudan is in North Carolina. Mauritania is in Oregon. That's how far away Mauritania is from Sudan. But Mauritania has offered, I guess, I have no idea how this was brokered, by the way, to host the Sudanese teams Al Hilal and Al Mariq in Mauritania's league until further notice. They just hopped right in. They're just hanging out in Mauritania's league until further notice. And if you look at the Mauritanian League standings, which, it's just kind of funny to see, Al Hilal Omdurman is top of the league right now. They have won all three of their opening matches in this other league in Mauritania. Al Mariq is in sixth. They've lost one of their first three matches. But granted, their only loss was to Al Hilal, the other Sudanese team that is now playing in the Mauritanian League. And if you're thinking the Mauritanian League is a complete pushover, Mauritania did also send a team to AFCON that I believe got a goal. I can't remember if they got a win. I really can't remember. They were memorable, though, at AFCON for having a player on their roster listed as AK-47, a guy named Abubakar Kamara, who is number 47, and that is just objectively the coolest thing you're going to hear today. But these two teams have been imported into the Mauritanian League. Maybe an opportunity for the Mauritanian League to try and raise its level, because these two clubs, Al Mariq and Al Hilal, are very clearly two of two of the best outfits in this entire Mauritanian league to begin with. Al Hilal, by the way, is going to be involved in African Champions League play. Right here, you can see they've been in the group stage each of the last 5 years, and they are trying to make it on there. Again, they made the semifinals of the African Champions League back in 2015. But it's just an incredibly historic club. And instead of letting the club die because of the civil war, a combination of, I'm sure, Sudan asking around to see what league it'd be able to play in, or these two clubs from Sudan asking around to see what league they'd be able to play in, and Mauritania being incredibly chill and just going, yeah, dude, come on in. You guys want to come play here? It's good for you. You guys get to stay alive, right? All your players are still getting played. They get out of getting paid. They get out of the war zone. You get your whole staff out of the war zone, right? You guys just come live in Mauritania and just run your club in Mauritania. And if you're Sudanese and you're not having to deal with the civil war, which ideally would be all of the people in Sudan, then you're still able to watch and root on your club. I mean, they got a friggin' 60,000 seat stadium called the Blue Jewel, which is also a sick nickname for a stadium, and totally checks out considering this, like, you probably see this from space, how blue they decided to make this thing. Sudan did try to play a few matches in June. It was like a really small league table thing that did not work. If you look at other Sudanese clubs, you'll see that, Sudan, the last matches that they were playing, like Hilal Asali, Asahil is like a mid-table team. The last matches they were playing were like in early April, and then the civil war became too much, and they stopped playing. Leaving the standings, by the way, just kind of frozen in time. It's kind of wild. Al Hilal and Al Mariq were the top two teams in the league standings, but this was the full functional Sudanese league, with your relegation spots and your continental qualification spots for the African Champions League and the African Confed Cup, which is like the Europa League in Africa. Yeah, you wish that this sort of stuff wouldn't happen, right? And you wish that football would be able to exist outside of it, I guess, but you wish this sort of stuff wouldn't happen at all. But it is a sobering reality to watch that sort of thing happen. And I'm very happy that they found a way for at least a couple of the clubs to be able to keep playing. Because the saddest reality of all is that in the world, this stuff is going to happen every once in a while, right? As much as football would like to be the thing that can cure all, unrest in the world, this sort of stuff is going to happen, and trying to be able to preserve those institutions that can give happiness to people, to 60,000 people, apparently, and let those teams keep playing so that, when they return, right, Al Hilal Omdurman is not die. It hasn't died, right? It's able to keep playing in African Champions League play and keep the Sudanese national team alive, because all the guys on Al Hilal and Al Mariq are still playing and staying sharp, and they don't have to go find other clubs. There's something special in that. There's something very kumbaya in that, and I think it's awesome, and I wanted to tell you about it, so now I have.